Let's bring in now Brian Wiebe. Thanks for sitting through that from BCHL Network. It's an affiliate of Dub Network. How you doing, Brian?
Doing well, thanks, Rod. How are you doing?
Good. Does the magic of opening day extend all the way out past the Rockies to BC? Are you guys excited? Is it a Mariners thing or is it a Blue Jays thing out there?
It's a bit of both. I think anytime the Jays are in Seattle, you see, when the border is open, of course, you see legions of fans from British Columbia and probably on your side of the Rockies too, head down to see it. So yeah, there's a fever here. Yeah.
Okay. Well, you know why we brought you on. It wasn't to talk about Major League Baseball, of course. And I kicked over a bit of a hornet's nest with this talk of the BCHL, the BC exit, as I'm calling it. And you cover the league. You have for years. You run a website for it. So what's the latest, Brian?
Well, I think that there's a couple of different conversations happening. I think the Canadian Junior Hockey League exit is something that I'm hearing as well as you. And I haven't heard anyone deny that. So I think that, and then we need to have Bill Chow come on from the SJHL. That's as much of a confirmation as you need, because obviously Bill would have privy to those conversations with the Canadian Junior Hockey League. So I think that is something that the BCHL is looking to do, is to separate itself from that association that is the CJHL. As for the Hornets' Nest that you kicked over last night, in terms of the North Division from the US Hockey League, that I haven't heard. So I can't confirm that that's something that I'm hearing, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's not true.
Well, we're, I think, early on in this. It came from an NHL source with BC ties, if that means anything to you. But does it make more sense to you that they would be looking at being a North Division of the USHL? It does to me, right? They would be joining a well-established league that's on the rise as opposed to doing their own thing.
I don't know. I think that the BCHL itself isn't necessarily not on the radar of NCAA scouts and NHL scouts. I think the track record speaks for itself in that regard. So it's a little perplexing for me, unless they sort of looked at doing something similar to where, like, they wouldn't necessarily do road trips over to the Midwest US, for example. Now, if you throw in expansion, looking at Washington State, maybe then there's something there or that kind of thing. But I'm not so sure that the BCHL necessarily needs to hitch its wagon to that. So I'm a bit on the fence, to be honest, because I can see some of the benefits, but I can also see situations where I kind of think about it and go, it doesn't really make sense.
No, I know. Well, you're the perfect guy to ask this because you've covered the league for so long. When this tip was given to me last week, I'm like, I'll report it, but I don't really understand the ramifications of this, right? And then I had Jason Tatarnic of the Estevan Bruins come on here. He coached in Chilliwack, and he said this is all about money and Royal Bank Cup. And I'm like, well, I thought it was about competing with the USHL. I can tell you my phone's been going crazy for the last 10 days on this, Brian. And it's like, it is about money. They think they can draw better with better opponents, and that includes the Alberta teams. But this has been talked about for years. That's my question to you. How far back has this chatter gone? And why now? Because it sounds like it is happening now. What triggered it to finally happen now?
This chatter goes back easily 20 years. And I'm not so sure it's happening now, to be honest. Like the movement from the Canadian Junior Hockey League isn't something that's been around. That chatter hasn't been around for 20 years. But the idea of a group of BCHL teams, lumping themselves with, and that's a negative term, but joining with Alberta Junior Hockey League teams to sort of form a, quote, super league, that conversation's been around for a really long time. And from what I'm hearing from people, it's not necessarily as much of a fait accompli as it seems maybe that it is. I saw your response to the AJHL's tweet where you said, it's not, they said it's not happening, and you said yet. I think that conversations like this happen all the time. It's just a matter of when, does the rubber actually hit the road? And until something is confirmed and announced, that's sort of what I'll wait for. But the CJHL thing is an interesting one, and I think that has a lot to do with recruiting. Because one thing that a lot of BCHL teams take an exception with is the fact that when it comes to recruiting, say, for example, there's a 16-year-old player in Alberta who wants to come play in the BC Hockey League. Well, he can't. If you're a U18 player, you can't leave your province to play. but you can do that to play in the Canadian Hockey League, so in the Western Hockey League, for example. And I know that a lot of people around the BCHL don't look at that as an apples to apples comparison. They say that's apples to oranges, and that's not fair. A 16-year-old player from across Canada, if he wants to come to the BCHL, should be able to if he wants, just like he can go play Major Junior if he wants.
Yeah, well, they're probably, I guess, maybe doing it for territorial reasons. I'm not sure what. I could see both sides of the argument. I got two last questions for you. And the reason that I didn't, when I say I don't really understand what's going on in the AJ and BCJ, as we still refer to it, here in the rectangle, the 306, the SJHL, it's 12 teams, and nobody's looking to leave, and everybody's in it together. And for the most part, it's always been the same 12 teams. Nobody really looks at themselves as better than anybody else. See what I'm saying? Like Flin Flon's gone back and forth between Manitoba and Saskatchewan, but that's about it. The sense that I'm getting is there are some Alberta teams that think they're better than the rest of the teams, and maybe they are. I don't know. Like, is that where this is coming from? That's the sense that I'm getting, and that's what I'm being told in these conversations.
Yeah, I mean, that's another conversation, too, that's been around for a long, long time. As long as I've covered the BCHL, that's for sure. I mean, and when you look at market size, it's true. Like, you can't compare, say, Surrey or Coquitlam to Merritt in terms of market size. It's just like that is not the same at all. And same thing with ownership structures. So if you've got deep-pocketed owners in some BCHL markets and then community-owned teams in other BCHL markets, I mean, those comparisons aren't the same. And so when it comes down to some of those things, that's where I think that there are two tiers of BCHL teams in that regard. And the lower tier ones are trying to compete with the upper tier ones in terms of recruiting players. And it even comes down to like arenas. The South Okanagan Event Center in Penticton is a jewel. It's like a mini NHL arena. And then you look at some of the other arenas around the league, and some of the other rinks are great, but they're not necessarily at that level. And that's not a fair comparison either. But I think that's the same in every league. And it's the same in the Western Hockey League. It's even the same in the National Hockey League, let's be honest. The difference at the pro level, obviously, is you're not looking at recruiting. So I think that that's part of it, too, is that the fact that there are really different levels of organization within the leagues.
Last question for you. And, I'm enjoying this Western Canadian junior hockey talk. We got a lot of viewers that love that. And Connor Bedard is in that discussion. I chatted with Joey Kemner on this show about it yesterday. I'm saying this. I meant to say it in the warm-up. I'll say it now. Brian, because he's from North Vancouver, that's why I'm asking you about Connor Bedard. We don't even need to hype him anymore. 19 points. He's doing it on his own. His stats speak for themselves. When did he first come on your radar as the next one?
It probably was, I want to say, as about a 13-year-old. And so I guess it would have been a year before his Bantam draft year, which isn't that long ago, which is the scary thing about Connor Bedard, right? Like, you think about that. He was only 13 2 years ago. But that's when it was for me. But you know what? That's an example of a guy that if he wanted to play in the Alberta Junior Hockey League at 16, he couldn't. And so, like, again, that's the difference. Like, we wouldn't be able to go to Regina if Regina was a junior A team. And I'm not trying to get back onto that bandwagon, but Bedard, I mean, he's a special talent for sure. And you look at the line of players that have come out of BC over the years, with whether it's Matthew Barzell or whether it's Kyle Turris or Morgan Riley and those types of players. I mean, he even looks to be a level ahead of those guys where they were at that age, and that's something remarkable because we're talking there about first-round draft picks.
Well, we are absolutely blessed and grateful to have him in our backyard and be able to call the games, and so thankful that he skates for the Regina Pats. Brian, where can people read your stuff?
Head over to bchlnetwork.ca. We're excited. The season gets going tomorrow night in 5 pods around British Columbia, and so that's really exciting. And our team over at BCHL Network should have everything covered wall to wall for you.
Wait a minute. I lost track of this. This season starts April 1st. You're starting? How many games?
No, tomorrow, April 2nd.
April's okay. Sorry, this isn't a joke. All teams playing?
16 out of 18.
Okay, cool. Okay, well, BCHL Network will have all the information. Brian, thanks for this, man. Very informative. Happy Easter.
Thanks, Rod. Appreciate it. You too.
All right, Brian Wiebe from BCHL Network joining us.
You're watching Rod Pedersen On Demand. For more of The Rod Pedersen Show, visit rodpedersen.com or follow Rod Pedersen on social media.